So I always had heard that khaki Campbell ducks were terrible mothers, but I never quite understood what people meant by that. I can actually remember sitting in our row house back in Washington, D.C. and reading books about various duck breeds. And when I first learned about the khaki Campbell ducks, they seemed like the perfect duck. They are prolific egg layers. They give you a tremendous amount of production. They lay as much, if not more, than a chicken does. And because they're sort of a small to mid-sized duck, the feed conversion to egg production that they offer, so how much food they eat versus how many eggs they produce, is really great. So they seemed like a natural choice for our farm and homestead. But the one side effect that I recall seeing all the time was that the khaki Campbell duck was a terrible mother. They said that their mothering instincts had just sort of been bred out of them and they didn't do a good job there. I never quite understood what that meant. I always just assumed that it meant that they were not very good at sitting on their eggs and hatching out their eggs, but that was a false assumption. So earlier this summer, I decided to try to do an experiment where I would hatch ducks naturally with our khaki Campbell ducks. And so the way that I did it was I let the eggs collect up in the duck house, and I didn't collect the eggs each morning, and I just let the ducks lay, and I wouldn't take the eggs away. I had read in a few places that if you allowed this type of behavior where the ducks were able to lay a bunch of eggs and have a big clutch of eggs, that they would eventually, at least one or two of them, would start to get broody. I'd been seeing signs that our ducks might be going broody over the last couple of months. I've had this one duck that kept laying clutches of eggs out in the pasture, and she'd sit on them all day, and then I'd have to come find her each night. And so that experience led me to believe that this idea of trying to get my khaki Campbell ducks to hatch their own ducklings was possible. And so, like I said earlier this summer, I set out to try this noble experiment. I don't know why it was so important for me to try to hatch my own ducklings. I think it was a matter of saying, well, gosh, I have my ducks living this natural life out on pasture, foraging a lot of their food, living these happy, free-ranging lives. Wouldn't it be great if I could actually continue that cycle of life by having the ducks naturally hatch their own offspring? And on top of it all, for me, the farmer, it actually meant a lot less work. When you brood ducklings, it's kind of a hassle. They require just the right conditions, and they require a ton of water, and they make a ton of mess. And I've definitely found that brooding ducklings has been somewhat of a hassle. Yes, they're cute and adorable and stuff, but still, it's very much a hassle. So as my big duck hatching experiment was going on, I got very into the experiment. It was so much fun to watch the broody ducks every morning as I'd go check on them, and it led me to believe that maybe something good would happen. And eventually, something good actually did happen. After about nearly a month, the ducks started to hatch some ducklings. First one duckling hatched, then another day another duckling hatched, and then another day another duckling hatched. And even though I ended up having like 3 or 4 ducks that went broody, I only successfully hatched 3 ducklings out of all of those eggs. Now I've got to admit, that exercise from a financial standpoint probably wasn't the best decision. If I think about what I can get for my duck eggs when I sell them for eating, or if I think about what I can get when I sell my duck eggs for hatching, which is like usually 4 or 5 times the price of what the eating eggs go for because of all the special care and handling that's required, I definitely lost money on the deal of hatching my own ducklings. So 3 ducklings for the price of, gosh, I probably wasted somewhere near 60 eggs. That was not a good payout. And so to that earlier axiom of, hey, khaki Campbell ducks are terrible mothers, that very much proved to be true. But at the same time, I was really enjoying having these 3 little baby ducks running around. They were so adorable. It was so cute to see them running around the pasture and being free and acting like an adult duck. You spend so much time brooding and taking very careful care of baby ducks when you have them in the brooder, that when you see baby ducks with their mother running naturally, swimming, it's kind of a remarkable sight. And I feel like it's been such an awesome experience to be able to see that here on the farm. So things have been going pretty well with the baby ducklings. Their growth rates have been a little bit uneven. There's one duckling that was born, I think the first duckling that was born, and it's gotten pretty big. It's significantly larger than the other ducklings. The other two ducklings had been actually lagging in size behind that first duckling. In fact, I just noticed that they were actually about half the size of the other duckling, which you don't think is necessarily a great sign, but overall they seem to be eating and moving well. The other day, I went out here and we were having yet another cold morning. We're now officially in September here on our farm. And here in northern Vermont, that means that the weather starts to change. I mean, I'm wearing a jacket, like it's in the 40s right now. A hard killing frost is probably only days away. And because our ducklings were hatched the first week of August, they're still growing up. They're not big, they're not huge. They're not as mature as I usually have ducks around this time of year. They're kind of behind the cycle a bit. The mother has been sort of hit or miss. Sometimes she has been very protective of her ducklings, but other times she has been an absolute neglectful parent and has left them stranded on more than one occasion, which has led me to wonder, is that axiom of khaki Campbell ducks being terrible mothers really true? But 2 days ago, I actually went out to check on the ducklings in the morning and go release the quacken. And when I released them, not all the ducklings came out. And when I went inside to investigate, I'd found that one of the ducklings had died. That night had also gotten pretty cold, so I'm wondering if the mom wasn't giving the duckling the body warmth it needed. It didn't seem like there were any attack marks or anything like it was from a drake or some sort of animal. It just seemed to expire. Maybe the duckling was just too small and too weak. Maybe it was the cold, I don't know. Regardless, it was kind of sad. I actually brought the other two ducklings in and tried to get them a warm up just to check on them, but after a short period of time, they seemed like they were doing so well and they were plucky, and so I put them back outside. They seemed actually pretty miserable when I had them inside, both from the fact that I just don't think they were used to the setting, as well as the fact that they missed the rest of the flock. I was worried that if I would pull them apart, I would actually do more harm than good. So I put them back in with the rest of the flock, plus it warmed up that day and I thought things were okay. But then the next morning, unfortunately, I had a second duckling die, and yeah, it's just a flippin' shame. I don't know what to say other than that. You know, baby animals are such a wonderful thing on the farm because they're this sign of new life and new opportunity and new potential. And it's always so exciting and they're so adorable. And I guess it's just really sad when that circle of life is much, much shorter than it should be. I know I'm probably to blame. Just by virtue of the fact that I've been trying to do this experiment of hatching my ducklings naturally with khaki Campbells. Mark my words, I will never ever have khaki Campbell ducks try to hatch eggs again. That will never happen on this farm. I've thoroughly learned my lesson here. Khaki Campbell ducks are horrible mothers. Release the quacken! Now, some might argue that I should still take that final duckling that we have surviving and keep them warm and keep them protected, but I can't see moving them from the rest of the flock. You know, ducks don't like to be alone, and I have no other ducklings of similar size to brood them with. I only have the chickens, but they're much larger and more mature, and I'd be worried that they'd attack them. And on top of it all, he fits so well with the rest of the flock. He's keeping up pretty well with everybody. He continues to grow like a weed, so I know I'm opening myself up for further risk and further loss, but I also know that by taking him away, it probably would do more harm than good. So I'm gonna leave him with the rest of the flock. If you guys wanna see how we actually brooded our large flock of khaki Campbell ducks and you can see progression of them as they grew, check out this playlist right here. I put it together for you guys so you can see kind of the early days of the quacken and how they grew up. I will see you guys over in those next videos. Thanks.